One day, Brian was working the daytime shift at the convenience store instead of his normal overnight shift.
It was approximately at 10:30 in the night, 10:30 to quarter to 11. That was a time when I was supposed to get over with my shift. So I was doing all my paperwork and everything. So I was all by myself. So there was one regular customer who I knew him, and he was all by himself. He asked me, he wanted to buy something. So he asked me, can I get this? So at that time, as I told you, I did not consider it a fright that I was, scared of that place because everybody knew me. So I went out. As soon I went out, I opened the door and I went out to open the phone accessories. Suddenly, 3 guys came jetting in and they had guns in their hand. I thought it was a joke because I really never thought that, it was something real happening, it was a robbery. And they turned me around for me to come in the bulletproof where the register is. So as I turned, not doing nothing, they just shot me in the back of my leg. After that, when I gave them the money, I was just praising God. And there was only 3 words I was continuously raising. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. So once I opened both the registers, they caught me by my shoulder and they dragged me because they knew that in the office there was money in that. As they were taking me to the office, I seen a raise on the floor with golden words, Jesus, and I could see it. That was a time basically gave me more of that faith that nothing is going to happen to me, that, oh, Jesus is there with me, and here he is, but still I was telling these words, thank you, Jesus, praise Jesus, I love you, Jesus. I could hear the other person with the gun telling me, give me the money. And that's the time I told him, okay, take the money on the side, because I knew we always kept 100 ones. It was in the drawer. I dragged myself all the way down to the phone, tried to dial 911, but I never knew. The same year, I put the phone in my ear and I could not hear the dial tone. So I was in the impression that there was something wrong with the phone. There was chunks of blood just coming out. Never in my life I seen that chunks just coming out, and I was getting suffocated because I could not breathe. Again, I tried to dial 911. So still I could not hear the dial tone, so I just kept the phone and I just hung my head down and I was just on the ground. And then suddenly one of a customer who I knew, he came in and he looked at me saying, oh, Brian, what happened? So he knew that something wrong has happened because he could see the blood. So suddenly he dialed 911.
Man, I was scared, man. Blows come out of his mouth.
This man doesn't want to be identified after he found the Citgo convenience store clerk shot inside the store. The man says he entered the store to find the clerk alone and injured, and that he'd been shot in the head.
at my position, I was the chief surgery resident at the time. So when a trauma alert comes in, a lot of times if it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill, not too heavy trauma, I let some of the junior residents take care of it for their own experience. I called down there and they say, you know, it's a gunshot wound to the head. So obviously that's a pretty serious injury. That's not something I let the junior residents take care of. So I rush down there and I get down there and I wonder where the guy is. Usually there's a lot of hoopla, usually everybody's frantic, trying to get things done, and that just wasn't occurring. And you know, there's this guy in the trauma bay just sitting there and he looked completely comfortable. We found some blood in his right ear, and he had a wound in his left neck, and he also had a gunshot wound to his leg. But for a gunshot wound to the head, I mean, he shouldn't have, first of all, chances are he probably wouldn't have lived. Second of all, if you get there after a gunshot wound to the head, you're in a bad way. So after we find out that they're stable, we do a slew of tests. We do check labs, just basic labs. We get a plain film of the C-spine, of the cervical spine. We also get a plain film of the chest. Bullets are tricky, they can go anywhere, so you never know. And then after that, we knew it was probably an entry wound to the right ear and an exit wound to the left. There's a lot of important structures in between those 2 points. Because we thought he most likely had an injury, and even if he didn't have an obvious injury, we would need to take him to the operating room to make sure of that, because there are so many structures in between there. If you don't diagnose it and treat it right away, it can be fatal later on.
And then they told me over there that my husband was shot and he's inside the surgery room.
Apparently he'd lost a lot of blood and she actually thought he was going to die.
95% of people who are shot in the head will die, and only 2% will live without disabilities. Brian's chances of survival were even lower, since he was shot with a .45, the largest practical handgun caliber in use. A bigger hole means more damage and faster blood loss.
The bullet came in right here, but before it even got to the bone, it actually ducked down into the soft tissue, and it broke the mandible here, so it didn't completely traverse the bone. Now, if it would have done that, if it would have gone up, obviously it would have hit the brain, and that would have either killed him or resulted in pretty significant disability. If it would have gone straight across, his eardrum is right here, and the carotid artery is right there. So we're talking less than an inch. We're talking maybe a centimeter difference between that artery and where the bullet actually ended up going. Fortunate for him, it went down, and even more fortunate for him, it didn't hit any of the important structures in the neck. As it traversed the neck, it would have had to miss his windpipe, it would have had to miss his trachea, it would have had to miss his esophagus, which is directly behind it. Then, behind that, you've got the spinal column. So it missed all 3 of those structures on the right side, then it went across, and it essentially missed most of those structures on the left side. It barely caught part of his internal jugular vein, but barely caught it. I mean, we did fix it, but if it would have been a very significant injury, he probably would have died from it. When bullets hit solid objects, it causes them to tumble, so a bullet doesn't always go on a straight course. Once it hits something solid, it tumbles, and it can spin like a curveball spins. Fortunate for him, it took a spin, and it spun in his favor. I mean, it could have, with all these structures, it should have hit something.